What's going on, boys? It is day number 15 of reading through the book of Job. For the past 3 days, we have been looking at 3 parts of Job's response to his friend Zophar. So for today, we are going to be looking at the response of another one of his friends that is going to be given to Job himself by the man named Eliphaz. Now, we've actually heard from this man in the early chapters of Job. I think it was maybe back in chapter 3 or 4. And for today's chapter, I have 3 little sections that I want to take a look at, and in particular, I want to, really kind of, break down, how Eliphaz, responds, and, really makes a great point about Job's kind of way of viewing God and, being the way he is. First off, I want to take a look at verse 2. It's a great kind of introduction to, his response, and his response is only one chapter, and then we go back to Job. He says in verse 2, he says, "Would a wise person answer with empty nations, or fill their belly with the hot east wind?" So, in other words, another kind of way to look at this is like, would a wise person answer with a bad kind of response, or a bad kind of bad rhetoric? A wise person doesn't just answer the right term. They answer with terms that make sense and have enough power that aren't just basic and mean nothing. So essentially he's getting at here, he's like, you're a wise person, Job. Why are you, saying all these things that have no meaning and have no value? Why are you following all these things that have no sense of power that can help you to understand why God has, inflicted these things onto you? The wise are filled with knowledge, and it allows them to make the right choice. There's a difference between making the right choice and making the choice that makes you feel good. Making the right choice is sometimes often the hard choice. I've said this before, there's a difference between, it's easier to make the easy choice than it is the right choice, because a lot of times the right choice is the hard choice. We don't want to take it because we know it's gonna make us have to work hard. And in this case, sometimes, being that wise and knowledgeable person means you have to make the hard choices. And that's what, Eliphaz is, he's like, look, Job, like, you can't take the easy way out of this. Like, you have to, look at this, that, this is something you're gonna have to work for, and this is something you're gonna really have to trust God for, because you obviously, God hasn't come out and said why He's done this, and obviously we know why God has done this, but to Job doesn't know that. Job's immortal on earth. He doesn't know that. We know that from an outside perspective, hearing from what has gone on in heaven and what happens on the earth. But Job doesn't know that. So if life is like, look, man, you gotta trust God. I know everything sucks right now, but you gotta trust God. And that's another thing we have to apply to our lives today. Like, look, we don't know what God is doing in heaven. Like, we know He's thriving and everything, and we can hear Him. But as far as things that are happening in the future, we don't know that. We don't know. We know that He has a plan for us. That's all we know. But we don't know what the little details are. We don't know the aspects of it. We don't know. It's why we have to trust Him, believe that He will do it right. And He does. And so I'm going to continue on to verses 10 through 13, where Eliphaz is like, look, how is what God has presented to you not enough? How is the people that God has placed in your life, between the elderly and the wise, how is that not enough for you? He says, the gray-haired and the aged are on our side, men even older than your father. Are God's consultations not enough for you, words spoken gently to you? Why has your heart carried you away, and why do your eyes flash, so that when you vent your rage against God and pour out such words from your mouth? So he's like, are the people that have been available not enough for you? Are these people who've been motivating you and willing to answer your questions and willing to just, give you some more words of wisdom and some advice? How are they not enough for you? Like maybe instead of just, thinking, well, these people aren't useful, maybe take a step back from venting and realize what has been presented. Because oftentimes when we take our step back, we can really look at, okay, well, this was available all the time. I didn't know that. Or maybe, this particular path was, there for me. I just overlooked it. A lot of times we overlook things so easily, and it often comes down to whether or not we're, paying attention and how fast we're wanting to chase after something. Things in life aren't meant to happen like instantly. Things are meant to take time, because we're meant to build ourselves up and build our way up so that we don't crumble. We don't want to fall down as easily. We don't want to be that, thin branch that as soon as someone steps on it, cracks and you're done. Um, and so, we have to, realize, and, life is like, look, Job, you know, do you not realize what, all these people that God has placed in your life to be supporters? Like, you have let yourself get so carried away by these negative thoughts that it has led you to, you know, disregard what has been presented. So he's like, look, realize that, like, look, take a breath, take a halt in your, process of what you're doing here, and look back, reflect back on what you've done and see, okay, was this help me or how is it not? Because if it hasn't, why do you keep going down the same path? If something's not working for you, why do you continue to do it? And that's the same way with us. And a lot of things don't work for us, but we still do it because we think it makes us feel good, pleasure. Things like lust and jealousy and anger and just all sorts of things. And it's not okay. It's not. And he kind of continues on, explaining this downfall that man will have if he, lets his heart, be deceived by these influences that have no power. He says in verse 31, he says, let him not deceive himself by trusting what is worthless, for he will get nothing in return. Only from God can you succeed. And when you trust these things that are not from God, and these idols, and these, bad, thoughts, and these, just because you've been struck down and you start throwing your fist at God, now you start to see your life fall apart. And it's all because of a decision that you made. Really, most importantly, our life, the reason why our life falls apart isn't because someone else did something to us. It's because we didn't do anything to help ourselves. Some people will say, well, you didn't try and help that person out. It's like, well, no, you didn't. But maybe, that person didn't try and help themselves. Because it's one thing to sit there and be like, okay, well, I'm going to try and help them out the best I can. But there's only so much you can do from a third-party perspective. It ultimately comes down to you, yourself, and how you're willing to make those next steps. Because if you're not willing to make those next steps, your life falls apart. That's on you. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't help. But ultimately in life, if we want to grow ourselves and we want to grow closer to God, we want to understand why he does these things, it ultimately comes down to us being willing to take that step in the water and go deeper and be willing to, just adapt. Think of it as you're going into the ocean for the first time in the year and you get in the water and it's cold. You put your feet in the water, you're like, oh, it's kind of cold, and then it gets up to your belly. And you're like, man, and I know for the guys, especially, when that water gets up, to your stomach, you're just like, oh my gosh. That's all great and everything, but no, it's like you have to go deeper. You have to be willing to go up to shoulder depth and sometimes even over your head to really just allow that to adapt. Allow yourself into it. Like, yes, it's going to suck at first, but as your body adapts, as you're able to adapt, you start becoming more comfortable. You start understanding. That's the same thing with God. Things are going to suck at first. Things are going to look bad, and they're going to feel like you're not getting anywhere, and they feel like you just have these constant just beatings all over your body, all over your soul. But I promise you, the more you embrace it and just hold your ground and say, Lord, you are my God. You are my creator. You are my leader, and I will not let that leave from me. Anything, there's nothing that can stop you. Nothing. No matter how much the world tries to throw things at you, it will not stop you. And that is the end of today's word. I hope you guys have had a great start to your week. We will be looking into a response from Job tomorrow, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Peace out, boys.